Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Buckeye Politics. It's me, your favorite Ohioan, and I hope you're having an amazing day. So, as many as you know, there's an important primary coming up in Ohio. We're going to try to primary DeWine. This is going to be a video about the Republican, mostly from the Republican point of view, on how their primary is going, kind of an update, but also just look at the election in general. So, with that, let's get into it. So we will be attempting to primary Republican Governor Mike DeWine. He is obviously under fire for opposing Trump at every turn with COVID and his imposing of lockdowns on Ohio. Many have called him given him the name Whitmer South, obviously in reference to Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And there are right now three men trying to replace him. The first is my former representative Jim Renacci. At first, Jim Renacci seems to be a solid candidate. His campaign slogan is "America First means Ohio First." However, looking deeper, Renacci is not the man for the job. Renacci is a swamp creature who has spent the better part of his life in politics. He's also a horrible campaigner. He was the Republican nominee for the Senate election back in 2018, and he lost to Sherrod Brown by a pretty sizable margin. So while I may like him as he's sort of a hometown guy for me, I would certainly prefer someone else. That man is Joe Blystone. Joe Blystone is a farmer from East Liverpool, Ohio, in the Youngstown area, and he is a constitutional conservative who reminds me of an Ammon Bundy type, the guy from Idaho. Very socially conservative and very anti-establishment. We're now going to get into the basic history of the Blystone campaign and its recent struggles. Blystone obviously entered the race as a constitutional conservative. He was, like so many Ohioans, fed up with the Columbus swamp. As soon as he entered, he picked a running mate in Joanna Swallen. Swallen is the owner of a local restaurant in Canton, Ohio, who was a good pick to provide for funding. Many people close to the campaign believe Blystone chose her to help bring in cash for the campaign, as she comes from money. This brings us to the big issue. Swallen dropped out more than a week ago. She retracted her paperwork because she had developed personal disagreements with Joe Blystone. Now, obviously, that's a huge issue, but although Swallen left on good terms, it's still a pretty big mark on the campaign. Obviously, losing your running mate is not a good sign, and to make matters worse, it seems as though Swallen was definitely not bringing in as much money as they expected, with one report showing she was only bringing in around $2,700 a month. That's like nothing. That's literally nothing. And especially when you take into account that a major factor in Blystone choosing Swallen was her and her husband's money. They were agreeing to donate nearly $10,000 a month. And in reality, they were donating 27% of what they agreed to donate. And much of that money went to signs just like this, which feature her name, and are useless now as she's dropped out. So pretty much what all of Blystone was making much less money than he originally intended to, and most of that went to stuff that is now no longer usable for the campaign. And a statewide candidate only bringing in $2,700 is not a good recipe for success. So after hearing this, you might think it's a good thing Swallen left, and they can find someone else to bring in more money, get a fresh start. But Blystone just can't find a replacement. Nobody wants to be part of his campaign. And we also have reports from volunteers that the members of the Blystone campaign are quitting every day. They have heard nothing from the higher-ups for almost a week and are frustrated, rightfully so. No one wants to volunteer their time and money to a campaign running around with its head cut off. From this point, you may not see how the Blystone campaign could be worse off. So to recap, they lost their lieutenant governor nominee, who is only bringing in $2,700. Blystone can't find anyone who wants to be the replacement, and more than 80 boots on the ground of volunteers have quit, and that number is growing by the day. It can get worse when you lose a well-known and successful Republican grassroots activist. Andy Hesselbert was a close friend of Joe Blystone and was a leader on the campaign trail. Hesselbert was behind the scenes in the campaign and behind the camera at nearly every one of Joe's rallies and events. However, on September 23, 2021, Andy Hesselbert announced he was leaving the campaign. He cited several reasons, including creating too many enemies, rude behavior behind the scenes, and self-sabotage. Basically, he called the Blystone campaign toxic and believed it was running itself into the ground. That really seems like the last straw, doesn't it? Well, voters seem to agree, as Blystone has dropped significantly in polling. Before, he was at about 12 to 15% in polling, which is incredible considering he was only bringing in a few $1,000s. However, the most recent poll from the Harris Group shows Blystone at just 9%, with Renacci leading DeWine handily. So with all this, I seriously doubt Blystone will be able to turn this around. I mean, it was always a long shot for him, but now it seems hopeless. But with this in mind, there may be one last hope for the anti-established wing of the Republican Party. It comes in the form of a pastor from Huber Heights named Neil Peterson. As mentioned before, he is a pastor and is running a very similar campaign to Joe Blystone, although maybe just a little bit more moderate. However, only time will tell whether he will make an impact on the race. I'd say the best thing you can do now is hope for Blystone, then if he fails, go for Peterson or Renacci. Believe me, I don't like DeWine or Renacci, but either is better than most of the Democrats. And so far, really only two have entered the race, and I must say they're very interesting candidates. The first is Mayor of Cincinnati, John Cranley, and he's been described by many as a blue dog, and I don't necessarily disagree. Cranley has a very simple, but you can decide for yourself. Cranley has a very simple plan for Ohio. He's going to legalize weed and use the money made to invest heavily in our industry and manufacturing jobs. And honestly, it's not a bad plan. The other Democrat who has entered the race is Nan Wheelie. She is the former mayor of Dayton, Ohio, and she reminds me of just kind of your stereotypical normal liberal. She's running on a pro-choice and semi-progressive platform in terms of the education and environment, and she will likely only do so well. Right now, I'd say the most likely scenario for the Ohio gubernatorial election is a Renacci victory in the primary over DeWine. DeWine accepts defeat and does not run for re-election. The Democrats nominate John Cranley, who makes polls tighter than expected as he gets support from both progressives in interstate Cleveland and Cincinnati and traditional Democratic blue dogs in Youngstown and eastern Ohio. However, Renacci will likely go on to win by about 5 to 6 points. So with that, thank you for watching this video, and be sure to subscribe for more Ohio and national politics.